Hi, my name is Kristen Blackton, and I am a candidate for my Master's in Curriculum and Instruction with an emphasis in reading through the University of Kansas. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. I've taught here for 6 years. I'm licensed with the state of Missouri 1 through 6th, all subjects, and 5 through 9 language arts. I've been teaching 6 years. 3 of those years were 7th grade language arts, and 3 of those years were in 8th grade language arts at a parochial school in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm blessed to teach language arts because I get to teach my loves, which are reading, writing, vocabulary, and grammar, and I also get to teach some of my favorite novels, including To Kill a Mockingbird and The Outsiders. For this portfolio, I'm going to go over the CAEP standard that involves technology. According to CAEP Standard 1.5, I will be able to model and apply technology standards as I design, implement, and assess learning experiences and engage students to improve learning and enrich my professional practice. I decided to choose this standard for several reasons. First of all, today's classrooms have increased access to technology. All of my current students have grown up their entire lives with access to different modes of technology, but unfortunately their idea of educational technology and internet research is usually limited to just a Google search. As a result, I want to show them that technology can be harnessed to improve learning and build knowledge. This means that I must integrate technology tools like computers, the internet, and educational software to engage them in the learning process so that they go beyond the role of consumer and into creator. Another reason I chose this standard is because I think that technology integration fits in very well with the gradual release of responsibility model that I learned about in my graduate program. Technology can be used in both guided practice as well as independent practice, with easy ways for me to collect data and give my students feedback automatically. I've also found that technology is an easy way to differentiate my instruction for my students with special needs, as well as striving readers, as different literacy programs provide the expository texts they need with access to glossaries and vocabulary support, so that they can make the gains they need to make in reading. Finally, I've found that technology is just a huge motivating factor for my students. They find the use of something as simple as Google Docs for taking notes online much more engaging than sitting there with paper and pencil. Technology also allows them to flex their creativity muscles as they're able to create things on Google Slides and create videos on Flipgrid. As a result, I found that integrating technology is essential to keep my students engaged in some tasks. I've chosen 2 artifacts, one for my graduate schoolwork and another for my own classroom, to demonstrate my classroom technology integration and show my proficiency with CAEP 1.5. For my first artifact for this standard, I've included an ebook that I made as part of CNT 840. My ebook was entitled A Trip Through Italy, and it was an informational book about the people, places, and items that you might find if you ever find yourself in Italy. I completed the course CNT 840 Emergent Literacy and the Beginning Reader during the fall of 2017. This course discussed the different facets of reading from an early childhood perspective, with an emphasis on the interconnecting relationships between students' phonological awareness, word recognition skills, fluency, and comprehension. After learning about some foundational theories of literacy, the course delved into some practical instructional strategies that would support literacy learning in the early stages of reading development. The culminating project was this ebook, which was influenced by both research and literacy theories. My ebook was created with a 3rd grade transitional reader in mind. According to Nielsen, in the transitional reading stage, students have developed automaticity with most sight words and are beginning to apply some decoding strategies while reading independently. Students in this stage need the most support and guidance in comprehension as they are beginning to learn more complex comprehension concepts. In addition, students at this stage should be reading expository texts in order to familiarize themselves with reading for information, as well as the text features that accompany nonfiction. The technology included in the eBook Builder enabled me to support students in their reading of expository texts through the use of animated reading coaches. These coaches asked the students implicit and explicit questions about the text and allowed me to include reading strategies like lookbacks and think-alouds as guided practice, providing extra support for students who needed it by asking questions about the text. This ebook also addresses the literacy component of vocabulary. According to the Common Core State Standards, students at the transitional stage of reading should be able to determine and clarify the meanings of unknown words by implementing different strategies. One such strategy that emerging readers must practice is the use of a dictionary or a glossary. When a student is reading the ebook and sees an unfamiliar word that is underlined, he or she can click on the word itself to be taken to a student-friendly definition in the book's glossary, accompanied with a visual. According to Dickinson and Tabors, Students need varied and increasingly complex interactions with words, so I intentionally used rare words and content-specific vocabulary in my informational ebook with the support of the glossary. The technology allowed me to support student word knowledge in this way. Fluency is yet another essential part of emerging literacy. I was able to model fluency in this ebook by using the technology to record myself reading each page. While I read, I paused at punctuation, included emphasis and emotion, and I read at a good pace. This served as a great model for my students who are in the transitional reading stage as they begin to work on their own fluency. According to Dini, increased accuracy directly affects comprehension of a text. So since my students will be exposed to new words in this ebook, it is important that they learn to pronounce them correctly. Of course, the ebook also allowed places for written responses, which integrated a written expression piece. This can become a formative assessment of students' comprehension of the text, as well as their depth of knowledge, which can be assessed by reviewing their responses. Finally, I was able to include some higher-order thinking questions within the ebook. Harvey and Gudvist note that comprehension is a continuum that spans from simple recall to authentic application in which students relate new knowledge to their own experiences. With my ebook, I wanted to encourage comprehension along many different points of this spectrum. The technology enabled me to do this through the use of the reading coaches as well as the written responses. Several of the questions aim to have students merge the content of the book with their own thinking. This fosters critical thinking skills and has them reach a greater depth of knowledge. While I don't currently teach emerging readers, this artifact still had several applications for me in my middle school language arts classroom. First of all, it helped me think of different ways that technology can help students work toward independence in reading. Especially as my students read more complex texts in the older grades, they need to start applying strategies in order to fully comprehend what they're reading. Some things that can help are recognizing the different text features, including the elements like glossaries, so that they can preview materials to access prior knowledge. I have already begun to implement this with them as they read nonfiction books for a current research project. In addition, this course and this project reminded me of the importance of expository texts and reading for information. As a literature teacher, I often focus too much on literary texts, but both types are important to include in my lessons. As stated before, this project also helped me think about different ways that technology can be implemented to help striving readers with vocabulary and fluency supports. I have begun to use different literacy online programs to help some of my students with special needs as they read expository texts. The research I did in this course was also a great reinforcement for the importance of reaching different parts of the comprehension spectrum. I shouldn't just focus on recall questions, but should move towards application and creation, as denoted in Bloom's taxonomy. Overall, the information that I learned from this course was really helpful in thinking about how emerging readers read, but also it was helpful in seeing how technology can help me in my quest to help my students. For Artifact 2 for this standard, I have a student-created Google form that they made before they began writing a speech for our speech unit. This particular artifact is a little different from the last since it was made by my students, but it was actually heavily inspired by my own work in CNT 743, Writing and Spelling Development and Instruction, as well as some professional development workshops that I have attended this year. Every year, my students are required to compose and deliver a speech to their peers and teachers as the culminating project of our speech unit. After teaching this writing and speaking unit twice, I began to see a pattern in my students' work. They often chose to focus their speeches on ideas that were very well known, and many of their speeches contained redundant information. After taking the course CNT 743, I began to identify this pattern as a failure to consider audience and purpose of writing. In the course, I learned from Graham and Harris that writing is a social discipline in which the writer and the reader communicate. This means that students should forge a connection between their writing topics and their readers in order to define the purpose of the text. In my speech writing unit, my students were choosing topics that they felt addressed at the prompt, but they were not thinking about how their writing affected both them and their audience. Therefore, I instituted a new portion of the unit in which I helped my students to employ technology as a way to assess a speech's audience and purpose. The artifacts are student-produced surveys that they created through Google Forms. You can see 2 of them created by my students on the screen now. In these surveys, my students composed several questions to evaluate their peers' knowledge and interest in certain ideas. The broad topic for their speeches was inventions, and while several students committed to certain inventions early on, they did not think about the definitions, background information, or evidence that would be required in a speech about the invention at hand. The creation of this artifact forced them to think about these things in the early stages of writing in relation to how their audience would respond to the information. Would their audience be invested in the topic? Would they be bored? How much do they already know about a certain invention? The Google survey would provide information to address all of these questions. I will walk you through one specific example of a great survey created by one of my students about penicillin. The student's idea was to write about penicillin, but before she started writing her speech, she wanted to know how much her peers, who would be her audience, know about the creation and the invention of penicillin. So she created a form that asked her peers some questions. For example, do you know what penicillin is, or have you ever heard of it? Who invented penicillin? She also asked them some of the diseases and illnesses that penicillin has helped to cure, and also about penicillin's status as an antibiotic. She was able to use the results of this survey to inform the outline for her speech so that she didn't go over information that her audience already knew, and she didn't assume that they knew something that they did not. So obviously, after they created the surveys, my students were able to share them with their peers, and then they were able to check the responses. As they began to read the responses to their surveys, many of them began to recognize that their initial speech outlines needed to be modified to fit their particular audiences. One student learned that half of her class was unaware of penicillin's function. She concluded that she would need to define penicillin's purpose and usage before going into its benefits in her speech. You can see from her introduction outline here that she was able to address this information at the very beginning of her speech in order to serve her audience's specific needs. She was able to identify these needs by using technology in a meaningful way. So how does this particular artifact apply to my future teaching? Well, first, it reinforced the importance of helping students analyze audience and writing. After reading the responses from their peers, as a whole, my students were more interested in finding applicable research to support their topics and addressing gaps in their peers' knowledge. They seemed more genuinely excited about and engaged in the writing assignment after the surveys because it had more authenticity. They were not merely writing for their grade, they were also writing for their peers. I believe that this artifact also shows a way to integrate technology in a way that makes the students the creators. It is easy for teachers to use technology to create slideshows or show videos, but it's harder to implement technology in a way in which students are not only learning content, in my case writing principles, but also a technology skill that they can carry over into high school and beyond. I feel like this artifact does both. In addition, this project does include real collaboration with peers. For the most part, my students were not only invested in giving their peers meaningful feedback through the surveys, but also in helping each other create better surveys themselves. For the project, I followed an inquiry framework reinforced by researcher Camborne, in which I let my students attempt new things without corrections from me, and I found that they thrived in this autonomy. Not only were they actively involved in the process, but I could see their metacognition occurring in real time. They discussed potential questions with classmates, questioned their survey choices, and continually edited their work after receiving feedback from their peers. This inquiry or design thinking framework is something that I learned about in a recent Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or STEM, conference that I attended a few months ago. I was able to incorporate the collaboration and design thinking elements with writing to have a cross-curricular writing experience, if you will. While this artifact shows that I am committed to helping my students use technology in a way that enhances their learning, I am continually seeking new technological tools that will help me meet that goal. This slide shows just a few of the classroom technology pieces that I've used in my class over the years. I'm continuing to use Flipgrid to work on fluency, Pear Deck to engage them in grammar concepts, and even resources from the Anti-Defamation League to reinforce our study of the Holocaust. I will continue to do this as technology grows and changes along with my students. But not only has this master's degree provided me with some insight into how to effectively integrate technology to support student learning, it's also given me insight into my own professional next steps. To begin with, I feel like I now have the tools that I need to explore leadership opportunities in my school and district. As a mentor to new teachers, I feel that I am up to date on best practices now, and I'm able to support them with pedagogy principles as well as literacy strategies to implement with students. I have more knowledge on reading, writing, spelling, and vocabulary strategies for students of a variety of ages. In the future, I may want to pursue becoming a reading or writing instructional coach to pass on my knowledge to other teachers in my area. This master's program has also prepared me to work with diverse learners. C&T 745 prepared me to work with English language learners through the Language and Literacy Exchange in the extensive readings. CNT 842 gave me the tools to diagnose striving readers and come up with individualized comprehension and literacy plans. And CNT 807, Multicultural Education, helped me take the path of cultural consciousness to create an inclusive space for my students. All that I have learned in this master's program has been supported by research, and through the research methods class, as well as the articles I've read, I have learned to recognize the merits of certain studies and how to support my lesson decisions in the classroom with research. Finally, this program has prepared me for my own future in education. In the coming years, I would love to take more courses in the field to grow in my professional knowledge and reach even more students. I have enjoyed my time in this program, and I have certainly grown over the past 2 years.